as a woman, you are different every single day of your cycle. You guys wake up every day, you do what you do, you go to sleep and you rinse and repeat. We wake up today and we're not the same as what we were yesterday. And tomorrow's going to be different again. Because of the hormone shifts that we experience, if you don't work with that, life feels hard.
Hello, Nat.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. You are an expert in female health, hormones. That's what you're known for, so it seems. But what's your elevator pitch when you introduce yourself to the world for the people who are unaware of your mode of expertise?
Yeah, I like to say I help women understand their hormones. Let's go again. I don't even know. I do. I like to say I help women understand their hormones simply so that they can make informed choices for their long-term health. Because if I had $1 for every time someone said, I wish I knew this earlier, and it was detrimental, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. So, I think that we overcomplicate our health as women, and I just want to make it make sense.
As someone who purchased one of your masterclasses, I can also say that you help men understand women's health.
Which masterclass did you buy?
You would have been you were probably the first masterclass I ever bought.
Really?
Yeah.
So
We were talking about this off camera, right? How long you've been doing this, and you've just evolved so much. And we're talking about your early day podcast and stuff. And I swear, you would have been one of the first people that I followed on Instagram.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So I was going out there, I was looking for educators. My wife put me onto you, and I just saw, I think I clicked through something and I found your masterclasses, and I think it was your thyroid one.
Yes.
I think it was a pre-recorded one. It wasn't a live event, so you'd obviously already done it and put it up there. And so you also help men. I don't know what the numbers would be, but you're helping men understand women's health as well.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, it would be. It would be.
You've been in the game a long time, though.
Turns out I have.
But you have a wisdom and expertise because there's a lot of now younger professionals coming into this space and are loving talking and teaching about female health and hormones. And they're in their early or mid-20s. But how many years has it been that you've been here for?
I love that we're having so many young people doing this.
Yeah.
I have been practicing for 17, maybe nearly 18 years. And which means, I've been in the industry for 20-something years. Wow. And it doesn't feel like that at all, I have to say. I feel like, we're all learning all the time, right? And everything's still evolving. But it does feel like yesterday, and that is so cliche. And we were just saying, I have 2 children. They've been part of that evolution and that process of growth. And Libby's nearly 15, which... how do I even have a 15-year-old? I don't know. I don't feel like I should have a 15-year-old. But it's just been a process of evolution, and it's been so incredible, and I feel such a great privilege to be able to help women and then add to that time, because that's that one thing that we can't learn.
And is there like a backstory that got you into the field?
I one day remember saying to my business partner really early on, I never, ever want to treat women's health. Like, it was a really bold, I just have this aversion, I'm not doing it. To me, when I looked at women that were coming into our clinic at the time, and we were very green and very new, they were all hormonal, they were all crazy. It's like, why would I want to treat?
I'm so nice to hear someone.
That's the exact same.
Like, I felt bad for thinking it.
No.
But it's like,
Right, because it was like,
awesome.
And then I had this vision of imagine every
now.
woman walking in the door being hormonal and upset, and that to me just didn't feel like a good time, not at all. Yeah. And so then you say, what did you want to do? Well, I wanted to specialise in gut health, because that felt like it was and gut health 20 years ago is not what gut health is today, right? It was what drew me to Chinese medicine, this understanding of the gut being the pivot is actually what really drew me in. And so I was like, that's what I want to do. And long story short, I had woman after woman after woman so frustrated and over the systems and the processes and having basically no answers. And I didn't feel equipped to actually support them. I didn't have the skills. Yeah, okay, I'd studied women's health, I'd studied gynecology, like I'd done all of that in my training, but I still didn't know. And what I realised when I really dived into it was that the symptoms that we were seeing women complain about were a direct result of lifestyle. They're a direct result of the environment and, more than anything, the stressful environment that we live in. But science and medicine hadn't caught up to that. So they weren't getting the answers from their health providers. And I remember saying I can tell you who these people are still in my mind, saying, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm really willing to try if you'll allow me to. And I just kept doing that, and I just kept practicing. And essentially that's what we're doing anyway.
Wait, you're saying professionals said that?
Me?
No. Like, who said, I don't really know what I'm doing?
I didn't know because I'd never been
No,
taught.
she's saying this about what the conversations she's having with her patients.
Yeah, I was saying, I was just being vulnerable and open to the patient.
Yeah.
But Nat, there are so many. This is beautiful. Over the weekend, have this like experience with a lot of young mentees and coaches of mine, right? This big mentorship, and a lot of them feel this like imposter syndrome, which is warranted to an extent. You need to get more experienced, but also this: how can I read blood work, look at hormones? How can I, understand the nuances of holistic health? I'm not a doctor, psychologist, dietitian. I don't have all these qualifications, but you just said. And you acknowledge that I'm doing my best. I don't really know.
Right. And I still sometimes don't know. Wow. I still sometimes don't know. I mean, I think that the more you do it, the more you know. Don't get me wrong. And there are certain things, especially to some of my staff will say, teach me how you know.
Yeah.
And
what do
I'm
you
like,
say?
It's time spent doing it. I've seen this same patient or this same version of this same patient probably thousands of times now. And I can tell you, I will look at people and say, oh, I need to fix X, or I need to fix testosterone, or I need to, I can see that, but that's only come with time. And so fast forward to answer the question, I started practicing with these women. We started getting great results. We were inundated as a clinic. I didn't have the structure to cope. It was just me.
So this was your clinic by this stage?
This was my clinic, and I had a business partner who I bought out, and it was when I bought her out that things really, for whatever reason, just really took off, and I had no infrastructure at all.
It was the NAT effect.
I don't know about that. I'll take it. Sounds great. When we just got busier and busier, I'm really privileged to I've always been very vocal. I've loved to talk about things. I think all of the areas that I exist in were very underground, and I wanted to share what I knew. So I started talking about it, whether it was Chinese medicine, again, at the time, very underground. No one was talking about it, or it was almost taboo to talk about it, or a disservice to the industry if you did talk about it. And I just kept talking. That's what it was. I kept talking.
Well, you said it before, consistency is king. And you were one of the people that were podcasting before podcasting was cool. Masterclassing before masterclassing was cool. You know what I mean? So you were kind of pioneering some of those things that are kind of mainstays today. And that's where you are now.
Yeah, well, I just love experimenting, as we were talking about earlier before we started. I don't know. I don't have a formula as to how we seem to be able to ride the wave. But if I look back, I feel very blessed to have always been riding the wave at the very front. And I guess that's just, some of us know how to do that and others don't, and it's something that's more innate than it is learned or taught. It's just something that's in you.
Do you think that, you came in early, and being an early mover is really important? You've been in the game a long time. That's a big component. Are there other habits and principles that you've lived by that you think have had a large influence, like a big cog in the wheel to your success and being able to work with so many people?
Yeah, I think consistency is obviously important. Being consistent in what you do, constantly showing up, whether it's creating masterclasses and consistently making masterclasses. That was, like I said, that was such an experiment. We did our first masterclass. We did a masterclass just in clinic, in a small room like we're in now, and we probably had 40 women in there, and we booked it out within half an hour. It was crazy when we put it to market. And my assistant said to me, you need to do that again. I remember we did it 8 times. before I went, we really should record this. So then we went to a bigger space and we recorded it. And then I realised, we could tour with this. So we made this method where we would create a masterclass, we would record it locally, we would tour, and we would wait for the end of the tour to then release the masterclass online. And we just kept repeating the process and repeating the process. And this is a long time ago now. These are some of our first masterclasses. It was a formula that worked. It was a way that we could reach more people. And then they would come to the masterclass and they would say, man, I wish my sister was here or my best friend was here. And we'd say, that's okay, there's a recording. You can get the recording.
I'm interested, so back in those days, how many of those attendees were health professionals and how many were just the normal women coming in, looking to learn about themselves?
I think I've always marketed to the everyday person.
Yeah.
I don't really have a huge desire to market to the health professional. That's never been, just has never landed. I like to make things simple, which is why I like to educate. I think that I will say this, there are definitely more skilled practitioners out there than me. My strength lies in communication. And when I sit with a patient, I get results because I sit there and I listen. Not necessarily by putting my hands on a patient and treating them. It's actually the listening and enrolling them in the process. And I think that's where I've worked out that that's my area of expertise. So there are definitely better, more skilled practitioners out there. And I say this all the time. But communication to me is everything across all things. And that's what I think I do best. And that's why I love showing up on social media. And that's why I love talking on a podcast or creating a masterclass, because it's easy for me. And I think also when things are easy, we tend to have fun doing it. When we're having fun, it just lands.
You're present, you're engaged. It's a flow.
Correct.
It doesn't feel like work.
It's not forced. When I'm mentoring, now I spend I split my time between both of these things. Now I love mentoring, probably more than I love the other work that I do, because I also want to help people to do the right things and not make the mistakes that I made. And so mentoring, this is what, to come back to my point here, is when people feel confused or can't get out of their way, or as health professionals just really are feeling stuck, I'll say, what do you do? What's fun? What do you do that's fun? Or what is easy in the business? What parts do you find easy? Because it's usually what you're good at. Don't ask me to do the accounting. My eyes will glaze over. I'm terrible at it. I have no desire. It's not fun. I know I need to know it, but it's on the bottom of the pile. But if you ask me to record a podcast, I'll be there straight away, no problem. Nice. So, finding what we're good at, I think also allows us, or also starts with us thinking about, what do I enjoy? What do I find fun? It's effortless. It's not forced. You get to be your authentic self, and it just flows.
That's a beautiful place to be in.
It's the easiest place to be in. It's the easiest place. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we do have to step out of our comfort zone to grow. We absolutely do. We need to be doing that all the time. But that to me looks like maybe, showing up to a podcast that is being broadcast to more people. That's nerve-wracking. Or, existing in different spaces that I haven't existed. It doesn't necessarily mean that I need to be the accountant.
You talked about communication, and that's being your strength and skill set. What do you think you do so exceptionally well and different? Because this resonates with me a lot. I think you can be the smartest technical practitioner in the world, but if you don't have the ability to communicate, empathize, hold space, then your ability to create change is very limited, at least long term. What do you think you do exceptionally well if you were to step outside of yourself and try and step outside of the bias or the self-judgment of humility and be like, you know what, I do these really well, and this is what I think if more people did, we could create even more profound change?
Yeah, I like this question. Again, coming back to what I do things really simply. And then with the simplicity, I can create the consistency, and with the consistency comes change. So I always say to patients and mentees, there's always more you can do. There's always extra things. People will say, what about this? What about that? Sure, there's always more. but how do you really hone it in to what is actually going to propel you forward? What's one or two things that are going to move you forward, and you doing those one or two things consistently to actually create change? So if it's with a patient, let's say, if I can get them to move their bowels, let's say, and I can get them to get outside and go for a walk every day, and I can get them to eat more fibre. Let's say these three things. Now, there are so many more things that they may need, but if I just started with those three things and the patient can understand what those three things are going to do to help them, and they do it consistently, they're going to get far more change than if I prescribe 10 supplements that they feel overwhelmed every time that they look at. They feel nauseous when they look at them. They keep forgetting to take them, and so therefore they do nothing. Which one's going to have the greater amount of change? Which one's going to have the better results? It's the person doing three simple things to move their bowels.
Yeah, we talk about this in health coaching all the time, right? It's like, that's never going to sell a book, by the way. So for your next book, don't bring it out, how to move your bowels and walk outside, because people are just going to walk straight past it. Right?
It's crazy.
Because
I know.
it's too boring.
But this is
it's
the
not
thing.
exciting. This is exactly right. It's about how to build value into these fundamental behaviors and things that you know are going to get that biggest return on investment, and to kind of steer people away from that shiny objects and the fads and the things that they think are more exciting. The 10 supplements, the supplements were definitely on the questions that I got asked, when I sort of put up that we were going to have you on the podcast. And we'll get to that, but I'm glad you started there. Yeah.
It's just so important. And in my years, I really do want to break it down for people. I've been at that point, don't get me wrong, the 10 supplements. It's usually because you actually don't know what to do. So you're like, I'm just going to prescribe everything and hope for the best.
And then it's on the onus of the client to spend
Correct.
$1,000.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't buy them. Oh, it didn't work.
But for me, it's like, how can I look at what is going to be sustainable for the patient
Okay.
long term? I don't want anyone on supplements long term unless we know that there's a fundamental problem that they need to be.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about the everyday, most people don't need to do this. Nutrition is paramount. You cannot out-supplement a bad diet.
How to unsupplement yourself, that is the title of a book.
There you go.
Now, credit to Ben, because when Ben and I met, he was trying to unsupplement me because I was in that dogma. And that's definitely something that I don't see many people, and you two seem to have the commonality of
It's because we're boomers, mate. You know what I mean? You young kids. we know what it's all about. We've been around.
hey, well, that's good. I'm around some elders here who can pass on
good,
wisdom.
that's great.
No, but seriously, there's a you guys seem to enforce from many, many years ago the priorities of foundations over additives like supplements, for example.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, Nat, but when I first started seeing a lot of clients and I would be doing a lot of testing, and when you're still learning, you're like, okay, how am I going to figure this out? How am I going to show that I'm valuable to this person, and how am I going to help them? And so you kind of led down the path of right, we're going to get this extensive testing done. We're going to do this implementation of the perfect cocktail, of nutrition interventions and supplements. And then over time you realize, oh, that was not worthwhile. You know what I mean? That was unnecessary. We were focusing on the wrong areas. And I do feel like one of the biggest contributing factors towards getting to that point is time, reps doing it, right? And having those other skills like communication. So if you're a poor communicator and you're a technician, then where are you going to bias yourself? In the technical side of things. You know what I mean? But when you learn, I was very much more a technician when I started out. I was a very introverted person. You know what I mean? I come out of a lab. So for me, it was definitely a process, but becoming more comfortable with that leads you to this point where it's for me, I always talk about unsupplementing people, always.
Which is so against the grain of what most people are advocating for. Patients will come in and they'll be on this supplement regime that makes my eyes glaze over. I'm like, how do you even know what's actually working here?
Have you had the double shopping bag walk in of supplements before? Yes. I have. Into my desk, and I'm like,
but then I will always say to a patient, okay, I need you to do something, and that is not be underwhelmed by what I'm about to show you you're going to do.
Yeah.
And I get consistency this
Get
way.
sleep.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so glad.
Crazy idea, guys.
But here's the thing with sleep, and I wanted to say this before. There is nothing you can do to out supplement. Like you can't. When it comes to sleep, there's one thing you can do, and that's spend time doing it. There's not a single, maybe meditate, but that's still, like, yes, it's going to help, but there is absolutely nothing that you can do that will replicate what sleep offers.
Yeah. And there's no one in that field that's like an expert in sleep and sleep research that would disagree with you on that. Everyone is like on the same page. It's not something that's, has much controversy to it. You can, like you mentioned, meditation, you can have some kind of like acute interventions to like help you through the next 24 to 48 hours, but no one's going to deny the fact that getting sleep regularly and not being in a chronic deficit is going to, be one of the fountains of youth.
Yet what's the one thing that we often don't prioritise is our sleep. And when you start to prioritise it, it's game changer. And if you don't know how to do that, start tracking it.
Yeah.
That has been a game changer for me. Tracking my sleep actually has been like, oh my gosh, where has this been all my life? It's insane. And just watching the numbers and seeing how I can not manipulate it, but I can work with that to my advantage.
You can see like the lifestyle choices that you make, how they influence those numbers as well. Do you know what I mean? Have a few drinks, check out what the sleep looks like the next morning. We've all done that. You know what I mean?
I refuse to look at my numbers after that for a few days.
You're an avoider.
No, I just
I've
know.
got a few of those.
I just know what it's going to look like. So I'm like, well, there's no use bringing myself down there. Let's we're moving forward. I do look at it because it fascinates me. Exactly. It fascinates me what my heart does. It fascinates me with my scores. But I do think it's the one thing that we take for granted. And if that's all you do, if you were to sleep better and move your bowels every day, you'd be feeling much better.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's go more granular then. Let's go more detailed. Okay. On that, and maybe to piggyback off at the start of the conversation, you said for every dollar something, you wouldn't be doing this, about female health, about the things that young women need to know that you wish that they knew. You talk about this a lot, but if you were to distill it in 3, perhaps, principles that you would universally teach, you could access every single female in the world under 25, but you only get 3 things to tell them. What do you tell them? Map
out and understand your menstrual cycle. 100%. There's nothing that you could because as a woman, you are different every single day of your cycle. You guys wake up every day, you do what you do, you go to sleep and you rinse and repeat. We wake up today and we're not the same as what we were yesterday. And tomorrow's going to be different again. So because of the hormone shifts that we experience, that if you don't work with that, life feels hard. Yeah. If you don't understand where you are in your cycle, it's sometimes impossible, and it can also feel like it's never going to end. Like the day that if you can start to understand where the ebbs and flows are. I know 2 days before my cycle's due, my period's due, I am good for nothing. My creativity is out the window. I'm not in pain. I might be a bit short-fused, like please stop breathing. That's annoying me.
Oh, wait. Where are you on your cycle now, Nat?
Actually there. Oh, shit. But I know my creativity's in the toilet. So what do is I have to prioritise what's important and do away with everything else. I do not need to start to create tasks, start to put new things on my plate. I don't need to do any of that. But the game changer for me is I used to get to this point and I used to think, where's my creativity and when is it coming back? And I'm an author. I need to be able to write these books. What happens if I never feel better? And you get into this spiral. Now knowing what I know and I observe, I'm like, oh yeah, here we are. It'll be back in a couple of days. Chill out. And if I chill out, I am ready to go cycle day 1. But if I don't, I'm awful cycle day 1. And I know this about myself. Now, every woman's different. I'm going to tell you something else that most women aren't like, but I figured this out myself. Most women on the first day of their cycle, we do need to take it slow. It's the day I would say, you're not going to smash through at the gym. You're going to sort of keep it low key. It might be the day you stretch more or go for a walk. Cycle day 1's my go day. That's the day I actually do want to smash it out at the gym. I want to lift something heavy. But that's not necessarily the case for every female. But I know this about myself. I can prioritise my cycle and I can work out when I'm on and when I'm not. And not only does it give me grace, it also helps me to perform better.
So Alex and I are obviously very big on tracking things, right? So we have a pretty elaborate set of sheets that we use with clients, and our latest iteration, which is probably 2 years old now, would it be 18 months?
Tell me the iteration.
With the menstrual cycle. So what we did, because obviously we're measuring a lot of, our sheets actually, like, it covers a lot of health stuff as well with symptom tracking and stuff, but there's a lot of body composition.
They're the best in the world. DM us if you want to buy them.
They are actually available to purchase.
I'm not playing.
Yeah, I know. You won't regret it if you love data. But what we did is we had our guy overlay the menstrual cycle over the body weight and over like some of the things that we track. And it's a really good tool, which many apps do like in terms of cycle tracking. But what this does is overlays it with all your sort of like performance and body composition stuff that you're tracking from going to the gym and things like that. And that is really good education, you know. So
Absolutely.
then because it's all well and good, like we sort of said, to teach the approximations of like what we generally know to be true across larger groups when it comes to different phases of the menstrual cycle and what you're like with different aspects, training being one of them. But there's so many individual differences.
So many. And I would never teach someone to go and lift something heavy on the first day of their cycle. I've just figured out that is actually what I need and what works for me. So the cycle's the first to answer this question.
Check.
The cycle, yes, we've done that, right? Yeah. Secondly, we have to become aware of our stress levels. We are so on autopilot when it comes to being in fight or flight. And it's as simple as being aware. You have to become conscious. Most of us either don't want to be stressed, we see it as a negative thing, or we're so overwhelmed and in this spiral, we can't even tell you where our head's at. So I say to patients, I just want you to become aware and actually go, Nat, I actually feel overwhelmed right now. Like, just acknowledge it. That's all you've got to do. You can't do anything about it if you don't acknowledge it in the first place. And I'll say to patients, we can do physically, we can do all the work. We can use the treatments, we can apply acupuncture, we can get supplements, we can use herbs, we can use nutrition. But if you don't fix this, you're going to be back here in 3 months.
Nat, have you ever had a patient with, like, let's say a lot of gastrointestinal symptoms? You've been working with, you've been trying to like just get it through. Like you have a very high workload in your life. We need to be talking about some stress management, just making time for yourself, struggling to like kind of make this sink in and actually get it deployed, like rolled out. And this patient goes away to Europe for a holiday. 4 weeks later, they come back and they go, Nat, you're not going to believe it. Like, while I was there, like I was eating, I was drinking, my gut symptoms went away. Like, have you had those kind of situations?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're blown away and they're like, I don't know why. And I'm
you just
you don't have a gut problem, right? What you have is a stress problem.
Yeah. Totally. So I think it spills into a lot of areas. When we're stressed and overwhelmed, we make poor food choices, we don't prioritize things like sleep. I don't think anyone is going to be blown away by saying we need to eat better and we need to sleep better. Like, you're not going to walk away going, oh, that was the best podcast I ever heard. It's not going to be. But I really cannot say this enough, where we are so overwhelmed on the daily that we can't even tell you when that's happening anymore. And it is so glorified and it is so learnt.
Yeah.
We have to unlearn this.
It's a hustle culture we are in.
It is. Yeah. And it's we've learnt it from our parents, and also they were living at a different time. But the other thing I will say to you is, the other thing I have to ask patients is, how much of your stress is your own and how much of your stress is because someone else is telling you how stressed you should be?
What do you mean?
Okay. Especially for women. So many women will, it's reinforced that you're stressed. So when I walked in here, you said to me, oh, Nat, you must be so busy.
With business and with work,
right?
With everything, yes.
Yeah. And yes, we are busy, but when we take busy on as women, we take that, it's stress. There's an element of stress that comes with that. I'm so busy. And I have to reframe women, because what will happen is someone that loves them will say to them, you're just so busy. You need to slow down. And it's usually our mothers. And what it does is it feeds the busyness. It feeds the hecticness of the life that we're living. And what I say to patients is, don't take on someone else's opinion of what your life is. if you can step back and say, instead of I'm so busy, because most women will say, oh, I'm just so busy, there's so much to do. Reframe this, I get to do a lot of things. I get to do a lot of things. It feels very different to I'm so busy. And when I can get them to reframe it, and then I can say, take a step back. Next time someone says, oh my gosh, you are so busy, you can actually reframe that and go, oh, I just get to do a lot of things. And you can keep that to yourself almost. It doesn't have to be something that you broadcast. But I watch especially my parents will say to me all the time, Nat, you're just so busy, or you're too busy. And we also have so many tools at our fingertips to help us to get a lot of things done. It's not like back in the day where you had to have the Teledex out and you opened it and you made a phone call and you couldn't email someone. It had to be, it's not like that anymore. We've got technology on our side to help us to achieve more and do less.
That way that you reframe that, sounds almost like, well, one, it's kind of like a mindful thing to do, right? Like, bring yourself to the present. Two, it's like a way of expressing gratitude. Like, you have the opportunity to do it. And three, maybe it's like reframing some maybe perceived ideas that you're constricted or you have obligations to do rather than opportunities to do.
Right. But if we can move that, because to the point, we do take on other people's opinions when we're listening to them, we're having a conversation, and then sometimes we take the stress one as a badge of honour. It's like, I'm so stressed, I'm just getting it all done, and we don't need to. We can do it with ease. We can still potentially achieve the same amount. It's just that we're not hastily doing it. We're not rushing to get it all done. We're actually just sitting there going through the motions.
Do you find that, like, you have patients that struggle to sit there with their own thoughts and not do something, you know what I mean, that's like furthering them towards their goals or their life and things like that?
Oh yeah, we always have those patients, but they're the ones that maybe I sit with a little bit longer and help them to understand why it's so important that they actually carve out time, which is my third point. So menstrual cycles, stress awareness, and carving out time, which again sounds so cliche, but we just don't do it. And if I look at the most successful people that I know, the mothers of 4 that work full-time, and I'm not saying that mothers of 4 that are at home, that's a full-time job in itself. And it's not a job that I ever was prepared to do, and I'd love to talk about that. But the ones that actually carve out time for themselves are the ones that do it all. They're the ones that do it all. And they do it in a way that's not in a stressful scenario. They actually recognise that by carving out time for themselves, they're better for everybody else.
Yeah.
That they are more relaxed, that they can make better choices, that they are able to do it all. They are able to do it all without as much of an impact on their health.
I feel like I'm having that conversation a lot to other health professionals and coaches, by the way.
It's
because I feel like it's
true.
a bit of a characteristic of people that are drawn to this profession is that helping of others and, sort of like putting yourself perhaps a little bit further down the line when it comes to, do what I say, not what I do, because you're busy, trying to help them the best they can. So
I made a rule this year. Actually, yes, the start of this year. I mean, the last few years have been crazy for everybody. I did a lot of delegating and deleting in 2021. What can I get rid of? What do I not need to do anymore? What can I automate? What can I delete? It's a great exercise for everyone to do once a month, like automate, delegate, delete.
It's great.
And the delegation part led me to a point where sometimes I didn't have that much to actually do anymore because there were people that could either do it better because that was their area of expertise, or we just didn't need to be doing it. Anyway, my point is I at the start of this year, I was like, right, this is the year for more self-care. Like this is the year that I actually need to commit to it. And so I just went through my calendar and I carved the time out. And my routine probably doesn't look like many other people in my industry anyway, but I have parts of my day that are actually blocked out for me to do me, whatever that needs to be. I'll always make sure that every week there's something that I'm doing that's actually probably some would see it as a little bit extravagant. I see it as necessary to be able to do all of the things that I do, but it is a game changer when we can prioritise that, especially as mothers when we live in a world that still expects, even though we know this, that still expects that mum is home with the kids, or that mum comes second to, like, even dad. You know, no one's out there criticising a father that's on a work trip, but they'll criticise a mother that's on a work trip.
This is one of the questions, by the way, that I had on my list. So I'm glad you started here. And the question basically went something along the lines of, what is your advice for mothers that are always juggling things? You know what I mean? And I think it had something to do with like around nutrition and health goals, you know, trying to do that. And that's something I know that we've had this discussion in the past because we both coach parents of newborns, and just trying to, again, like reframe some of the ideas around putting yourself last, making sure, you know, Bubs is all good. And then, oh, it's 1 o'clock and I haven't eaten. You know what I mean? So
I think the first thing we have to let me say this again. I remember watching someone else who's very dear to me when she first had her first child, and she said to me, I'm a better mother for working. And I thought it was the most horrible thing I'd ever heard. I was like, oh, that is awful, until I was a mum. Mm-hmm. And then I realised that when I'm not working, there's a huge part of me that's not fulfilled. And when I'm not fulfilled, I'm not a great mum. Even though I might be present, I'm not the best mum that I could be.
Yeah.
And, you know, we were lucky. I had full-time care whenever I needed it through family. So we never had to worry about childcare as such. And I actually attribute that to part of where we are today, because I had that. Not everybody has that, and I understand that. But I realised that I needed to fill a large part of me that way to be happy at home. And there are people that could not even think about going back to work as a new mum. That would be like the last thing on their list, and that's okay. That's completely fine as long as you know that. It comes back to what I was saying is what do you love doing? Yeah. What fills you up? What do you find fun? And so, you know, first and foremost, I had to recognise where my time needed to be spent for me to feel good. Then I had to think about, okay, well, if I recognise that I want to be at home with my children as well, but I also want to work. So how do I make that happen? Then I realised I kind of needed to prioritise my nutrition and my movement. They were two important things that I know I need to do. So how do I do that? And so I started, I guess, you need to map out a calendar, and you need to map out your days, and you need to create some consistency around those days. It doesn't mean that every day is the same. It doesn't even mean that you can't have a sleep in if you need to as a mother. That's something that's important too. But it meant that there were blocks of time that were allocated for what needed to get done. Yep. And that way everything gets done, well, most of the time. So I think there is a small time where you need to prioritise mapping that out. And once you've got that, and you can start to be consistent and then rinse and repeat. But, you know, and whatever that looks like for you, it's not don't follow my day, follow your day.
Some of my first escapades with this conversation were actually with men before I started coaching more and more women and mothers. And any guys listening to this know exactly where I'm going with this. So like you want to go to the gym, you know, wife has had a big day, and you've had a big day, and you're just like, it's your release. You know what I mean? If you don't go, you just like resent everything. You're not bringing home the best version of yourself. And so as someone who like really enjoys, you know, like we go deep with our coaching, and we talk about a lot of things, especially with, you know, with the men that we coach who maybe haven't had like this level of communication before, especially around a lot of these topics. And it would be about explaining to them, listen, I want you to have a discussion with the wife and talk about scheduling your training when it best suits you both. Because like when you haven't done that, you got to understand that if she knew that it was so that you could bring home the best husband and the best father, then she's going to do what she can to make that happen. But what you've got to understand is where that best suits both of you in your schedule. Do you know what I mean? And that when I saw the success of that, as I was doing it, and I realized this is like a fundamental part of like filling your cup, you know what I mean, and bringing home that best person. And then it goes exactly the same way when I started coaching mothers as well, you know.
And I think to that point, I would encourage any duo that are trying to juggle everything to actually have that conversation either way.
Yeah.
So as a female saying to your partner, when can we hold space for you to go to the gym, and when can you hold space that I could maybe do that?
Exactly.
And it's been a very interesting evolution in our house, I have to say. When the kids were little, it was a bit easier. I'd pop them into the creche at the gym, and I'd go to the gym, or I'd take, my mother-in-law would be always at the ready to look after the kids. And I'd just figure out when that would work. Then fast forward, we used to laugh about this, and this is why I want to mention it. My husband started many years ago doing CrossFit, and my husband has always been a very fit person, but he used to go to the gym and he used to come home and he would give me the rundown from start to finish what he had done at the gym. And if you know anything about me by now, I'm like, I don't need that level of detail in my life. And I'd sit there and I'd be like, I know I need to be interested because it's something that's really important to him, yet this conversation is killing every fibre of my being. And so eventually I was like, listen, he said to me one day, can you just come to the gym with me? And I was like, I don't want to come to the gym with you. Long story short, the story of him and what he would do at the gym got so frustrating for me. It was just easier to go to the gym with him rather than have to hear all of that. So we came up with this regime that worked for us, where after work we would drop the kids off to my mother-in-law. This is so funny. We'd drop the kids off to my mother-in-law. We would go to the gym together. We would pick the kids up with dinner and go home. It was like drive-through. It was like, this is brilliant. So for years we had this opportunity to spend time together. Granted, our mother-in-law did cook dinner, which was not something that everybody gets, but it worked for a period of time where we got to go together. I didn't have to listen to the regime of the routine or whatever it was that he was doing. And it was excellent until kids got old enough that they actually had after-school activities. So, you do something until it doesn't work anymore, but I would encourage anybody that if you can actually, sometimes if it makes sense for you to do it together, do it together.
That was the ultimate fill your cup habit stacking type situation, wasn't it? It went from like listening to something where it's like nails running down a chalkboard to getting to train, getting to spend time with your husband, having the kids looked after, picking up dinner.
And it was like drive-through on the way home. It was brilliant. But, I know not everybody has that.
Yeah.
I get that. But I'm really grateful for that opportunity because it was a true highlight. Those years were a true highlight.
Well, I know your mother-in-law. We spoke
Apparently.
about this before we started rolling. There's a little bit of 6 degrees of separation. So we got to roll back a couple of years here, though. So, when I was dating my wife and it came time to ask her parents for her hand in marriage, I did the right thing and I went in there into their place in Albert Park, this little house, and the plastic coverings on the couches, and my wife is Greek, anyway, Katerina, my mother-in-law now, she had her friend sitting there on the couch, and I realized this is my one opportunity to ask for the marriage. So I'm like, I'm just going to have to do it, in front of Katerina's friend. And so here I am, I'm laying my heart on the line. I'm talking to her dad. Her dad's kind of like looking at me just like complete, like no emotion on his face. Like he doesn't even understand what I'm saying, right? Katerina's kind of like in shock. She's just sitting there. And I finished my spiel. Like I'm not down on my knees or anything, but like I'm finished my spiel and I'm kind of like laid it all out there and I'm just like, just silence. And I'm looking around. And anyway, Orania comes to the rescue, throws her hands up in the air and comes and gives me this big hug. And she's like, oh, that's amazing. Congratulations, this and that. And then, of course, my in-laws jump in after that.
Well, they had no choice.
They had no choice.
She's the reason that you got married.
That's exactly right.
My goodness, who knew?
She's a saint in my books.
Isn't she?
That's right.
I have to say, my mother-in-law is such a crucial part of our family. Obviously, all mother-in-laws are, but it has always been a constant in terms of support. And it's not always conventional, and again there were definitely times where I would look at the situation and think, gosh, what are they going to think? I'm off overseas, Chris is at home with the children, what sort of mother do they think that I am? And not just from my mother-in-law, but there's from everybody. There can be cultural judgment when it comes to you doing things a little bit differently. What we very quickly realised was, and I think she realised too, was that, you know, so long as there's one of us and there's love and they're fed, and there's one of us consistently there, I think that's definitely what kids need. And also mum's happy. There's an element of mum's doing what she loves. It's very hard also, I think, as women. I'm torn because I want to spend time with my children. I also want them to feel, in terms of a role model that you can go out and you can achieve these things. And I sometimes get torn between those two things. Should I be at home with my children or should I be chasing my dreams? And the way that we've been able to structure our lives now does allow for that. But for the outsider looking in, I do wonder sometimes what they think is happening. But my mother-in-law, I have to say, yes, she's never been judgmental. She's been an amazing support. And some people say, oh my goodness, my mother-in-law. And I'm like, my mother-in-law doesn't give me any grief. Yeah. And she's such a, she would never say it to me. She would never say anything. But I know that she's one of those people that, she's a little bit outside of the mold, even though she's, she's old school. Yeah. So I love that story so much, so much. Well,
I want to ask, okay, because there's like two questions and thoughts here. Has there ever been friction in your relationship with your husband preferring a more traditional relationship, maybe like your mother-in-law raised him to kind of be, perhaps? And then how do we think about, this is like, I guess both of you could speak here, the last 100 or 50 years, like there's been like a shift, where this entrepreneurial spirit and this worker spirit has shifted the family dynamic, where mothers, not only fathers are able to work, and mothers and wives are doing all of that as well and living their own dreams, which is a beautiful thing. But then how do you contend with, well, how much of this is a projection via just modern society? How much am I rejecting my own maternal desire because of this new modern projection that we're now living? Or how much of it is purely intrinsic my own? Or how much of it is being manipulated by culture? Like, how do you think about that?
It's a really good question. I think there's something that I do, and I would encourage anyone in a relationship to do, and it's taken me a long time to get here, and that is I need to ask for what I need, because you don't know what I need, and Chris doesn't necessarily know what I need, and it's taken me a really long time. For example, I've had a really horrible day. I know I am going to have a meltdown and cry. I'm just saving it till I get home to a safe space. And I don't need you to tell me what to do. I don't need anything. I just need you to tell me it's going to be okay. I went through, I went through a phase where I would go to people that I love, whether it was Chris or my dad, who's, my parents are very much a big part of our life. And I would get yelled at because that's what they thought. That's what they innately just thought that you do. How did you get yourself in this position? Why are you doing this? This is not okay. Perhaps you should be at home with the kids. So I learnt to say, I'm going to tell you something now, and I need you to not do anything other than tell me it's going to be okay. That's just one example of asking for what you need. And how stupid is it that I had to do that? However, at the same time, this is where I think men and women are very different. So if you're going to your partner and you're saying, men just want to rescue generally. They want to rescue their partner. They want to make it okay. So initially you get angry and then you go, just sell the clinic. That's always a good one. Sell the clinic. Stop doing that. Don't do the mentoring, whatever. That doesn't solve anything. So I need to say to you, just tell me it's going to be okay. I'm going to tell you something right now. I just need you to listen and tell me it's going to be okay. And I think by doing that and asking for what I need, then I really need to do that a few times before it becomes something that's on Chris's radar. So it's the same as I need to do a workout. I actually just need to go and lift something heavy. Same thing. No one knows unless you ask for it. So there's been many times that there's been stress and tension, and I think that comes with every relationship.
About your roles in the relationship itself, traditional versus more of a modern approach.
So in that, I'm not really answering the question.
It's okay.
The point being is that it's difficult when the roles are reversed, and this is where, let me start this again. It's difficult when the roles are reversed, and this is where you do need to ask for what you need, because it's not innate. It's not the normal way that society sees it. Does that make sense now?
Yeah, I can see what you're saying.
So I need to actually say, this is what I need, because this is not really what we would consider to be normal. It's not. Like, I need to, for example, again, I'm going overseas for a work trip. I'm really stressed out by that, right? Let's say. Now, if I don't ask for what I need in those moments, how is Chris ever going to know how to support me so that I can do that when I'm feeling overwhelmed, stressed, anxious? I'm doing things that I shouldn't be doing, as in I'm leaving my children, and do you have food, and all of the things that mums actually think about when they're leaving. If I don't tell him what I need, then I'm not going to get that support. But I've worked out that by asking for what I need, I guess we're talking about a role reversal almost, which is not. Then we can flip that around to get what we both need. But there has been tension. Of course, there's been tension at times where we're doing things a little bit against the grain. The tension never comes from the two of us. The tension comes from everybody's opinions outside of us. Every single time. I can say that now because we've been there enough times. It's never how we're feeling, because when we're both in a situation and we're both able to thrive and feel good, it doesn't matter. It's always been someone else's opinion on the outside, which comes back to what I was saying before. We've taken someone else's opinion as our belief when it's actually not. So when we got to realise this, that it actually, I'm like, you're happy? Yep. I'm happy? Yep. We don't have an issue here then, do we? It's everybody else's opinion on what we're doing that they've got an issue with. The issue isn't us. So the more that we continued to evolve in this space where Chris was pretty much home with the kids most of the time, I was out working a lot of the time, and that was totally working for us, the less noisy it was.
Right.
No one else's opinion mattered. But it was, you're right, at the beginning there was friction and tension, mostly because both of us were questioning, is this what this should look like? Is mum supposed to be? Geordie was maybe 3 when I went on my first overseas trip, or maybe 4. I was sick to my stomach. I can't tell you how unwell I was, like just with stress of leaving. Once I was on the plane, it was like, woohoo! But that's not the point. The more we did it, and the more we found our way of doing it, and the less we listened to everybody, the easier it was. But at the beginning we were listening to everybody, because that's what you do.
To answer your question, my preconceived kind of like ideas going into parenthood about how much time should a mother spend at home was probably more influenced by what I thought would be best in terms of the emotional development of the child that you're going to have. And then once you become a parent, you're in for so many reality checks of what's important and things like that. And to your point, and I can say this pretty confidently about my wife Zoe as well, it's that she's all about recognizing what fills her cup makes her a better mother, better wife, just like myself. And she's not ready to let go of work, because work is very fulfilling for her as well, and thus is just part of making her a better person too. And so once you kind of see that roll out, it kind of took away any preconceived notions that I thought of any traditional roles, kind of one situation being better than another, and it's very context dependent on the person and the people in that relationship, right? But to your point about within your relationship, I can tell you, so when we had Ruben, he was 12 weeks old when we went into lockdown here first in Australia, and my mother-in-law passed away just before the lockdowns got really bad. So she was battling cancer for a long time, and it was just a very sad and turbulent part of our life. She held on to see the birth of our first child, which was absolutely amazing, and she passed before it got to a point where you couldn't go into hospitals and see someone in palliative care, which you know, it was a blessing in a way because that would have been very distressful, you know, to sort of get to that point. And it was a very uncertain time, like COVID, lockdowns. My wife Zoe was just obviously going through the grief of like losing mum and being a first time mum. And now I was stuck at home working full time, actually making sure that I was working harder than ever because we didn't know what the futures look like. In an office that is actually just another living room and doesn't have like a separate door. Okay, so we were in each other's space. She was having a maternity leave whilst all this stuff had just happened. And it was tough. And I would be like running in and out of the kitchen and things like that. And what we noticed that as a couple, like we were exhausted for starters because we were brand new parents trying to figure out the parent thing. But when we would say things towards each other towards the end of the evening, like sometimes we'd snap at each other and we'd never really had that historically in our relationship. And I kind of like recognized it. I'm like, we're not actually like frustrated with each other here. We're just exhausted. We're emotional. And so my suggestion was, and I've used this a lot with clients, is I said to her in the least patronizing way that I could possibly do as a health coach, hey babe, how do you feel about us doing a little bit of a relationship check-in? We'll do it on a Saturday night, okay? And what I would like, why I'm doing this is because I want us to be like nourishing our relationship and working on it. Like it takes work endlessly, right? And we both know that. But we're tired, we're exhausted, we're saying things to each other, which we don't really mean, or just a tone, I suppose, in our language. And it's because, you know, of what's going on. And we'll order some takeaway. There'll be no dishes to clean up. And what we can do is like we can get a pad and paper. I'll buy a notebook and we'll write things down through the week that we want to bring up. Okay. And so we did that. The first session went down pretty hard on poor Benny because I'd written down.
Backfired.
I backfired. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay. I see what I'm in for here.
She was like, yes.
That's exactly what she was like. So I left the door wide open to get kicked in the teeth with that one. But you know, I'd written one thing down and she had a page or two.
She had 17 and you had one.
So by the time we got through hers and I'd well and truly finished my meal, I realized that, look, I tried to just reframe and just kind of recenter on the purpose of like what this was for. And I said, look, I can completely acknowledge all this. We're very calm because we were bringing forward to like Ruben was in bed. There was no dishes to be done. It was the weekend. It was the perfect time to be having this chat without kind of like bringing into it like I'm going into back because I'm tired here. Anyway, from the second one onwards, it was brilliant. It had the exact desired effect. We both saw where each other were coming from. It became less I want to talk, you left the dish out, and more I saw when I was on a Zoom and Ruben started crying and you took him upstairs and out of the way. And, you know, I just want to acknowledge that I'm really grateful that you do things like that. And it became something like that. And so that was one of the aspects of like, you know, being in each other's space and like kind of like understanding those roles and realizing that the relationship is always going to take work and that no one's a mind reader.
Right.
No one's a mind reader.
100%.
So
I do. I think that's one thing that we're not very good at is asking for what we need. Mm-hmm. And it's a game changer. It's no different to you don't know what you don't know. You've witnessed your wife go through labour twice. How different was the first labour to the second?
It was so different, I nearly delivered our second.
Well, like people say to me with the first baby, you know, how was that? I'm like, well, I didn't know what I was doing. Chris didn't know what he was doing. He was useless. I needed things. I didn't know what I needed. I didn't know what to ask for. Second time around, I was like, you were actually useless, not your fault. Neither of us knew what we were doing. But now knowing what we know, now knowing what I know, this is what I would like in this, you know, next experience. And can you help that to happen? Very, very different. But again, you don't know what you don't know. So we need to ask. It doesn't matter if it's your partner, your someone else you have a relationship, your parent, wherever the scenario is. I think it's really hard too. It's so hard the first time that you ask for something like that. It can be as simple as saying, you know, I do feel really overwhelmed right now. I would really love to go for a walk around the block. I need to go for a walk around the block. Is that okay? not asking for permission in the sense of, is that okay with you? It's like someone needs to maybe watch the kids. Would that be okay? That's what I need right now. So, and that also isn't just in a relationship. That can also be with your coach or your health provider or whoever it is, that it's not just a matter of you going and you listening to everything that they've got to say. It's about you asking for what you need, getting the answers that you need. It's not just in a relationship. I want to put that out there. Yeah. We so often hand our power away when we're in these situations, and when we can, again, understand things and then learn what to ask for, life just gets better. First time will be hard, then it'll get easier after that.
It's great conversation there.
Good, because I didn't answer the question in the first place, but I feel like we got there in the end.
It's okay.
When you said something like 100 years, I'm like, bro, we're boomers. We're not centenarians. Like, I don't know how far back we're going with this, like, cultural assessments.
Do you remember when we got horse and carts to school? Yeah, that was fun. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you about inflation, because I remember how cheap things used to be.
I mean, to that point too, though, and watching the evolution of just healthcare, I've always sat on the other side of alternative health, right? And I don't know if you've watched, but so often what alternative health brings to the table, around 10 years later, conventional medicine adopt.
Yep.
And so it's been very interesting, because a lot of people in the last few years have been very petrified, scared, worried, and we've watched this play out. It's just at a different scale, but I've watched this when it comes to illness or whatever it might be in terms of the health industry. Probiotics is a great one. Probiotics 15 years ago, no one was taking probiotics. The alternative world was saying, you could use these. The conventional medicine world was saying, oh, no, we don't know that they're safe. That's not proven. That doesn't work. Don't do that. It's unsafe, blah, blah. And then fast forward now, it's like, well, you can buy them at the supermarket if you really wanted to. So my point being is we get very scared of new things that are coming up. But I would encourage you to stand back and take a look and see where the alternative world has existed. It generally follows that. But with that, it can be very scary and it can feel very overwhelming when we have our eyes open to new things. Yeah. I think a lot of people are living with a lot of uncertainty at the moment, because all of a sudden they're starting to think outside the box. And is it okay to think outside the box? Is it okay to ask my provider a question? Heaven forbid I ask someone. So I don't know. I think it's really important for us to sort of realise that for those that are feeling overwhelmed and scared with whatever it might be, it's like, it's okay. We've been here before. This is what I'm trying to say. Like, we've been here before. We've seen the pendulum swing before, and we're back here again.
You only can see it if you look back through history, right?
Correct.
And there's a, I guess you could call it my generation of fearful, timid, unsure people, because they haven't been here before. But you guys, and maybe then, your parents have as well.
That's true.
What's something that is intimidating a culture right now in the health realm that you think is unwarranted?
I think so times have changed, and it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, there is so much more scrutiny, I feel, on people in our profession, and just in general, like these days, because of the presence of like social media. Whereas if we go back 10, 15 years, I mean, when I finished my biochemistry degree, this is what I tell people. I'm like, I was photocopying stuff and saving things on like a floppy disk, and you know what I mean? Having to like move around my Pamela Anderson photos, because it took up like, one photo took up like 1/3 of the space.
How many Pamela Anderson photos you have, Ben?
Like 3 on a floppy disk or something like that, right?
How many floppy disks you got, Ben? Pamela Anderson?
Exactly.
All of them.
He used to have these 5-pack floppy disk hard cases that I would take to university.
Where did you study? Where did you study?
I studied at Swinburne. And so back to I was going to say this earlier. So when you talked about females' health, so I started a double degree at Swinburne doing psychology and biochemistry, right? And then after, there was 210, I think, people in my psychology class, and eight of them were male, right? So there was like 202 girls or something.
Oh my gosh!
And so I went to the lectures, and I have never seen so many women like hands up, and I'm just like listening to like these women grab the floor and like talk, and I was just like, damn, like,
Wow.
I thought this would be a really good
a
opportunity.
lot of Pamela
I
Andersons,
thought this
Ben.
would be a really good opportunity to meet the right girl. And I'm just like listening. I'm like, that ain't the right girl. That ain't the right girl. A psychology class is not the right class to be finding the right person. And so I dropped psych and I majored in chem, and the rest is history. But in doing what I do now, I always look back on this and say, damn, I should have done that last year of psychology, right? So yeah, Swinburne in Hawthorne.
Yeah, right. I was asking because I'm curious.
Yeah.
Thought maybe we studied the same place. That's why I was asking. My first degree was at La Trobe a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect segue. Back then, and even maybe you could argue the last 5-10 years, like university and degrees have been put, they're on a pedestal. And now the pedestal seems to be, quite a bit lower. And the respect to degrees is a lot lower. But in this field of holistic health, you need to understand what you're talking about thoroughly, because it's complex, it's detailed, and you can severely change someone's life and go the other way as well and fuck it up. So what do you think is the utility of university degrees, and how should people look out for them to understand the experience and qualifications and skill set of a practitioner they want to work with, versus or in conjunction with actual experience and skill set?
That is a very interesting question. I still think that we need some level of education. Well, here's the thing. We need to stay in our lane with whatever we're doing. Whether if you're a health coach, be a health coach. You don't need to be a gynecologist. Nobody's going to go and see the health coach that's trying to do, surgery. So I think that qualifications are important to a degree. That doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that are extremely intelligent who may not have the qualifications but have spent a lot of time doing what they do. It's time spent doing. Again, I come back to that again. It's time spent with patient or client interactions. And that's what I would be looking for. How many times have you sat with somebody and listened to their story and figured out what to do, as opposed to how many journal articles have you read? Yeah. So I do think on some level we have to have this. We have to have learnt somewhere. We have to have learnt it from somewhere, and then we get to apply it. There's some amazing people out there in the health world that have no qualifications. Sometimes I wish I had no qualifications, because it would mean that, well, you can go and say, you can speak the truth. But when you have qualifications, it puts you in a lane, and you need to stay within that lane, which I think you should stay in. Like, to my point before, stay in your lane. You're not going to be a coach and be a surgeon. You shouldn't be anyway. So, but those that are, I can think of some examples, and they will tell you straight up, I have no qualifications. Don't listen to what I'm saying, but listen to what I'm saying. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And they have huge followings, and they are not wrong with what they're doing. But when you're actually sitting with someone in a consultation, you need to be very mindful, and you need to have the skills to be able to take their health in a positive direction.
You can be an exceptional generalist, and that lane can be very wide as well. So if you're focusing on fundamental aspects of like behavior change and nutrition and things like that, that's a wide lane with like the majority of success for most people that are going to walk in and see you. You know what I mean? As you start to get into towards, very specific cases and stuff like that, that's where you
Yeah, I really do think it's just actually, there's a lot of people out there who have never sat with a patient or client.
As a health professional, you mean?
Well, that's what the online world allows.
That's asinine and crazy to me if you are not.
But that doesn't it? Doesn't the online world allow that?
Yeah. I mean, it's.
And so, again, you can be a great researcher, and you can put out great knowledge in the research that you've actually read. But when you apply that research to a clinical scenario or a one-on-one setting, is very different from a research paper that you've read.
Oh, absolutely.
So
And-
it's not crazy, actually. I want to hedge what I said. It's not crazy. It's like it's different purposes, right? Like a researcher has its own purposes. A PhD has its own purpose, and then a clinician, and then a practitioner. Like they have their own purposes, and we come and hopefully integrate together to take from each other.
Totally. But there are many health providers out there that you are watching on the daily that either have never sat with a one-on-one or haven't sat with a one-on-one for 15 years.
Yeah.
For me, I toyed with the idea of not being in clinic. In fact, I stepped out of clinic for a couple of years. Still had my clinic, but I didn't treat for 2 years. And I noticed two things. I became further out of touch with what was happening right now, what was current with patients, and my staff, who I would see as, you know, I'm their head practitioner, I'm the founder of the clinic, that my presence was missing as well. And so I stepped back into clinic for those reasons. But it was a good experiment for me to step out and learn that. But I do think that there is something very important about sitting, listening and learning as a practitioner
Yes.
to continue to be able to evolve and to provide patients with what's relevant. And because it changes. What I'm treating now is very different to what I was treating 20 years ago.
Yeah. What trends have you seen over that? Because you have such a long time horizon.
What trends have I seen? When I first started, we were doing a lot more. I was doing a lot more fertility when we started. Now I would say and I think it's an evolution. I think it's also what you've experienced. So that I can't treat menopause because I can treat menopause, but can I? Because I haven't been through it. So
Can a male treat menopause then? A male health professional?
Of course, you can treat it. But I think when you've actually experienced something,
Yeah, it's different.
is very different. To your point, we were doing a lot of fertility to begin with. Then I realised, let's fix it before it's broken. Let's reach out to young women. So I guess my focus changed. The biggest shift I've seen is the changes that we've experienced because of COVID, because of the virus itself. That's where I've seen the biggest shift with patients.
I understand what you're saying. Ben, we both understand. Can you please clarify for those who can't read between the lines of what you're really saying?
I've seen dramatic shifts in people's health as a result of COVID.
Right.
So we know it's for people, it's either reactivated autoimmune conditions that already existed. Maybe they've got remnants of the virus. Maybe it's peaked inflammation. It can be that there's an impact on the cardiovascular system. I don't think anyone's arguing now. We don't have good answers. It's a result of COVID and or the vaccine. No one's arguing about that anymore. We know.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
How dogmatic we were.
It's not one, or in my experience, and I have treated, I would say, in upwards of 1,000 patients now when it comes to COVID, and that was just through pure coincidence, and I can talk to that if you want me to.
Yeah.
But it can be one or the other. Let me explain this. Someone can be vaccinated and not have any symptoms, but then get COVID and it tips them over the line.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Someone, and this is my anecdotal experience, someone can have COVID and be fine and then get vaccinated and it tips them over the edge. So I don't know that there's good research as to at what point tips what. I have my theory around that. But we know that there's definitely evidence that both can cause long-term implications with health.
Yeah. And this is what, like, I remember saying this as it was happening. It was like, I'm like, time's going to tell this. They're not going to be able to fudge these statistics forever.
No.
Because like what I was seeing the same thing wasn't even 12 months into it. And I remember just like chatting to other practitioners going, are you seeing what I'm seeing with menstrual cycles? Are you seeing what I'm seeing with this? And they're just like, yeah, we'll deal with a lot of autoimmune. We'll deal with a lot of menstrual stuff.
Once upon a time, I would ask a patient, when it came to autoimmune, have you had glandular fever? Usually was a great, it's not the factor, but I would say it's an accumulation of factors and usually what pulled the trigger and tips them into their autoimmune actually being turned on, the illness being turned on. I am now seeing that it's COVID related. COVID is the trigger the virus itself. So once upon a time, the virus was glandular fever or dengue fever or some type of virus.
Yep.
Now it's COVID. That's we're talking about the post-COVID implications. And it's been wild. I don't know if you were following along. We got COVID really early on. Before you're allowed to have COVID, so we were still in lockdown. And so we got COVID. You weren't allowed to have COVID, but we still had COVID, and it was very interesting. I remember I was really unwell, and I remember saying to Chris, "What do I do with this? Like, you can't hide for 14 days. People are going to know. You cannot. If I clear my schedule for 14 days, you don't think patients are going to know? They're going to know first and foremost. Secondly, I show up every day on social media. They're going to know." So I sat with it, and once I was feeling a bit better, I went to socials and I was like, so I've got COVID. And I could not have prepared myself for where that took us in a great way. People were watching my Instagram stories went from maybe being, let's say 4,000, 5,000 views a day to 25, 30,000 views a day. Like, it was insane because people were watching, they were curious, but they were also so captivated by watching somebody not die that had COVID. And because that was what the message was at that point in time, get COVID, you're going to die. But what that did was it put us in a position where when people then got COVID, I was their go-to person because they didn't know anyone else that had had it and recovered. And so they were coming to us. So again, it's the same thing as when I first started out. I guess I'm like, I never wanted to treat COVID. In fact, I got investigated initially for claiming to treat COVID. I'm like, I don't want to treat COVID. 3 years ago, it was pretty niche to say I'm treating COVID. Yeah. There were like 4 people that had it. Why would I niche my market into that? Like, I would never, ever claim to treat COVID. But we were put in a position where all of a sudden I was being asked so many questions that I got very curious. I was head deep into the research. And we created a masterclass on post-COVID recovery because what I was seeing were changes to the menstrual cycle. We were definitely seeing people with heart issues. We were seeing people with cognitive issues. We were seeing people with circulatory issues. Like, we know it had this effect on people. And so I remember it was Christmas, and what happened at Christmas? We opened up. If you remember, we opened up, the borders opened, everyone was able to travel. I mean, you knew what was going to happen. We were going to see numbers rise. And I was getting all these questions, and it was between Christmas and New Year, and I said to Chris, I'm going to have to open up the clinic. Like, I don't know what to do with these people. They're messaging me. I don't know what to do. And so I said to Livy, all right, I'm going to do telehealth. Livy's my daughter. I'm going to do telehealth. You're going to do reception. And I'm going to open up half a day. This is in my holidays. I'm going to open up half a day, 15-minute time slots, and I'm just going to it was just to support people. It's not treating COVID. It's just COVID support. The right supplements, accessing the right supplements, because they were hard to get as well. Yeah. And I opened up half the day, and within half an hour, all the bookings were gone. And I was like, okay. So I opened up the other half of that day. 20 minutes later, all the bookings are gone. I'm like,
crazy.
Open up the next day. We ended up seeing about 130 patients in 3 days. Olivia on reception, who's 15, and me, like every 15 minutes. If you know anything about me, I loathe repetition. Anything that's repetitive. But it was such a privilege to sit with these people and just tell them that they're going to be okay and to provide them with some support to get through it. Then that positioned us that everyone wanted to see if they had antibodies. So then we were testing everybody for antibodies. So we just had this database of people that had COVID, and I got to watch. And it was fascinating. And we can definitely say, yes, there were 2 or 3 menstrual cycles after COVID or the vaccine, one or the other, that women's cycles were impacted. They were bleeding heavier. We know that it caused inflammation in the ovaries. So we were definitely seeing these shifts. And that also, the impact that came down to genetics at the end of the day. It came down to your genes, really, and then whatever else was at play. So, I mean, I still can't smell after having COVID. I definitely had long COVID. It's been a journey the last 2 years nearly. It's been crazy. But I still
now? Mm-hmm. How does tasting food go?
I know what it should taste like, so that helps. But I probably have about 60% of my taste, maybe 70% of my taste.
I saw some research. I can't remember the compound. There's a compound done to help bring back your
I've tried
senses.
a lot of things.
I bet.
And I think it's just that I still have a lot of inflammation in my body after having COVID.
Is there any biomarker that you've looked at to represent that?
Yes, and I've just done another further lot of tests to compare to. I mean, there's a few things that we're looking at and measuring, but I wish I had tested at the time
Yeah.
to compare to.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things I didn't really have a baseline for.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things we definitely know that we were concerned about is reactivation of autoimmune conditions. And I did have autoimmune issues as a child, and they were definitely reactivated with COVID. I felt it, and then ongoing. So it's been, and I think it's a perfect storm for me. I think it's timing with my hormones, starting to change and having COVID at the same time. I think it's a double whammy. So anyway, we'll live to tell the tale and then upgrade our skills and be able to help women, in similar positions. But it has been particularly interesting, and so that's the new trend.
How interesting.
It's been fascinating.
I have, and I'm sure Ben and I have many more things we could talk to you about, but I want to be conscious that you have your appointment still.
I do have an appointment after this.
Double check. Okay. We have to wrap out now. I wanted to ask you about PMS, but we might have to do all of those other questions maybe in a round 2.
Yeah,
I would love to do a round 2 and
Yeah?
then not have, what I've got after this, and this is me being prioritising me, is I've got an IV booked after this.
Oh,
and I was like,
nice.
yeah, and it's all part of trying to get this smell
You should have
back.
brought him down here. You got the
I
IV. We could have done the podcast at the
all
same time.
sat here and done that.
I think we should
couldn't
actually do that one day. Can they do they do mobile IVs?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we should definitely do that.
We can absolutely
We're
do
going
that.
to try. We're going to try some IV therapy to try and I've got a friend of mine that's like, I'm going to get your smell back. I'm like,
You're not
Sure.
getting you're not getting an NAD push or anything though, because we want to sit there and do a Ben Greenfield and put like that live on a live. It's pretty uncomfortable.
It can be
no,
a test.
I'm like, no, I need to actually stay sane after this. I
Yeah.
need to be able to function after this. So
Yeah.
anyway, I'm at their mercy, but I actually don't know what I'm having today.
Yeah, we definitely have to do a part 2 because I had some things I wanted to ask you as well, just on inflammation. And I know you've been very visible on social media lately, talking about something Alex has been talking about, which is like functional reference ranges and optimal reference
yes.
ranges. So we'd love to go there because I don't know if we've done that yet. Did we?
I
do
would
a
love.
podcast?
No,
I would love.
not ranges.
I would love to come back and I'll
Yeah.
just clear the day.
Yeah.
Sit here for 4 hours. That would be amazing.
Yeah, we have to do that.
Okay.
Awesome.
Nat, any last thoughts? Asks, quotes from philosophers? That's my jam.
Well, yeah, I could say many things. Like I said, I think the main thing is women, we do get to do it all. We just have to work out how to put that in a line. And once you figure it out, you've got to change it again. I'm just going to put that out there too. But really, if all you've heard today is start to prioritize what you need, and I promise you, it is such a game changer. You cannot, it's so cliche, but you cannot fill from an empty cup. You just can't. And so really prioritizing yourself, if it's the one thing that women will look back and regret when I speak to them, and I help women and they turn 60 and they say, I wish I knew this earlier. I wish I did this earlier. I wish I put myself first. I could have been this, this and this. So if that's all you heard, then great. Like prioritize yourself and watch how much more you have for everybody, and watch how much better you feel along the process, and watch how much your hormones are happier for doing that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nat.
Thank you. Yeah. And obviously we'll drop some links below this in terms of
Yes.
finding you.
Absolutely.
It's not hard to find you.
No, it's not hard.
It's not hard at all.
There's only one.
But yeah, obviously there's lots of ways that people can work with you, whether it's through the
Absolutely.
clinic, whether it's through masterclasses and educational things that you offer, whether it's the book. If somebody out there can create new categories in bookstores, we need a young female health category person.
We do.
ASAP.
We do.
Yeah.
We need to create that category because
You're
it doesn't
carving it.
exist.
That's
yes.
right.
Well, apparently I am. So there you go. But
Well done.
thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and I would love to come back.
Oh, amazing. Done. Thank you, Nat.
Thanks.